Hey guys, this is Patrick Carl Sadamoon. You might know me as the guy with the most IM medals in the world, or something like that. I'm also the CGO of Fnatic, and you're watching Duncan Thorin Shields YouTube channel. Pleasure being here.
OG has announced their international CSGO lineup. This is, of course, the organisation best and primarily known for their Dota 2 lineup, which was originally famous. The narrative was that they won the most majors when Valve instituted that a few years back, but never the international, never TI, the big world championship crown that every player seeks. And now, of course, they've turned that entire narrative around, and they're actually famous now for being the team not only to win 2 TIs, back to back at that, but now actually they're not actually even that good in the rest of the circuit, or at least they haven't been the last couple of years when they ended up being the World Championship winners at the end. Now, both of those victories came in incredible fashion. One was really unexpected, the first one. They lost a bunch of players. They hadn't done anything in the lead up to it. The other one was unexpected because they basically almost took a hiatus in the meantime between TIs. Anna, one of the star carries of the team, took months off the game. They didn't particularly show strong form. Then in they came after the circuit to TI, and somehow they won it again. So the lineup in CSGO is one that you may well have heard about if you've been listening to the best journalists in the scene or talk shows. So the parts that we knew were always going to be there are the first 3 names, which is NBK, Valde, Aleksib. The thing is, these are obviously players who needed squads, who've been top talents in the last couple of years, or at least relative to their roles. They obviously have history. Listen, I actually put them almost in order of descending amounts of experience in history there, but they've all done big things throughout their careers. And then the other 2 names are the spots that, quite frankly, were being cycled through depending on where the transfer market was at the time, because this process started way back when NBK, Aleksib, etc. were kicked out of their teams around the major. That's when they've been scouting out, looking for these talents, going through different people. And unfortunately for them, some of the people actually basically went away. So the people they have now for the other 2 roles are ISSA, who you may remember from Hellraisers, and Mantuu, who you're not going to particularly know, but he was playing for Alternate Attacks, the German team. Now, as I say, they were considering other people. One of the most famous ones that was obviously leaked was Jampi, the very talented Finnish AWPer, who you might have seen in FPL. I actually just wrote an article about him recently. It's called No Company for Young Men, because it's about how Valve vac bans people and then doesn't give any consideration to the context and just bans you for life from ever playing in any of their majors, even if you were an 8-year-old kid, even if you were a 20-year-old guy who was absolutely remorseful about it. So he's someone who unfortunately was a victim of that, and you'll as a result probably never see him play at the top level competitive player. But there are also other players, and I won't leak them all right at this point in time. Maybe in the future I'll figure out a way I can confirm and then reveal the information without just taking it from one source or something. But I'll just say this. Some of the players who they might have had have since ended up in other teams and signed for other teams. Perhaps some or one is now in Complexity. There's a little gem for you. Now let's go through these players as we always do with lineups. Obviously there's no one to replace, it's just players we're adding. So we'll talk about the value of them, who they are. NBK, the most storied player on this team. Remember, this guy was playing in CSGO finals from his first ever event in CSGO. And I'd imagine if you go and look it up, I'm pretty sure every year of his career except 2018, and even then in 2018 at the end of that year, they'll play at DreamHack Open or whatever. But in terms of big tier 1 events, I'm going to go ahead and say I'm pretty sure he probably every year in his career played in one except 2018. And then in 2019, he came back with Vitality in a different role again, initially as in-game leader, then as obviously giving up the in-game leader role and just being a role player. And the good thing about NBK is, you might think if you've just heard the last year's worth of me critiquing NBK 2018 when he tried to be an IGL in G2, you might think I don't like the guy or I think he's a bad player or something. Absolutely not the case, never has been. I think he's actually one of the most durable players we've had in CSGO. Individually, he's a very intelligent player, has a really good grasp on the game. He's a good team player, he has a great mindset for how to work with people. He has famously helped out a number of top players. He is a versatile talent, he has played most roles in the game. I absolutely think if he really wanted to, I don't think this is his mindset anymore or how he views the game, he could go back and be a star player. What he does now actually reminds me of what some of the really amazing supports in both Dota 2, just to do the connection, and Overwatch actually have done, which is in Dota 2, you have some really good supports, some 4s or 5s, who at times were either carries, Nortil himself from OG is a good example, or they were like offlaners who were greedy offlaners. And the reason why they go over there, so same thing in Overwatch, when all the players I knew from Quake who were the really monster mechanical talents, like fucking Cooler and Cypher and let me see, Dahang, most of these players came into, and I mean, Rafa was never a super mechanical talent, but he was obviously a great dueler. Most of these players came into Overwatch, and they actually ended up playing the supportive roles, not the DPS role that you would think that would require their insane mechanics. And one of the reasons why these players typically move to those roles is because normally those roles are occupied by just bad players who got along early enough in their career and figured out they had to do that role. So think of like people who become defenders in football. And then you hope within that, you become a good player and make use of your talents so you don't need as much mechanical skill. But you know what? If you're a Paolo Maldini who chooses to be a defender and has the skills, you can just be the best defender that ever fucking played the game. So what happens is these players figure out, not only could this be a great direction for my career and be incredibly successful, but since, just as in Dota 2, they saw with all those high MMR players like Miracle, Weeha, you can get just some mechanical beast. He's not going to be the best player in the world, but I mean, Miracle did become it eventually, but initially they can be plugged and played and just be played around in terms of their aim, whereas actually getting nuance and a lot of ability and experience in those other roles, that can actually be worth its weight in gold. That's why in Dota, actually, the great captains, many of them are hard fives and get fuck all resources. They're actually the players who have the most enduring careers, have the best resumes, win the most big championships, because they figure out that that position is the least replaceable, actually. It's actually the star in terms of the skill in the game that can often be replaceable, especially because stars come and go based on their form, and then oftentimes they're not as useful. So I absolutely think if this guy wanted to be a star again, if I could take him back in time, he could be. I don't think he would be like a superstar, top 10 player, but he could probably be a top 20 player, maybe top 30 player in the world. I think that's possible for him. That's the kind of talent we're talking about. And crucially, amazing work ethic. Very, very dedicated player who is always thinking about what his team's doing, where his team's at, what they need to change, what's going on with the roles in the team. Should we consider other roster moves? So I actually think he's someone where people have underplayed some of these aspects just because he wasn't good as an in-game leader, which listen, that was a personal point of contention with me and him. I told him the whole time, like, listen, I've watched your game. I know talking to you privately, you can say all the stuff, but it's never translated into the server. And I also did think, just as a mild aside, it was bullshit that when Alex took over as IGL for all except one map, and eventually even that map, Inferno, MBK himself just stopped referencing in interviews the concept of who the IGL was or the captaincy and all this. Even though the whole squad, when he first joined, was supposed to be like about him being the in-game leader and how that was going to be key in unlocking Ziwu, etc., which he never particularly did. Ziwu just did what Ziwu did, and actually it was unlocking the rest of the team that was the problem, right? So I would say, when I say he's a very dedicated player, unfortunately for him, within the French scene, I would say almost to a fault, quite frankly, because a lot of the other French players, when they're not playing with him, characterise him as he's too robotic, he's too serious, because the French way is like, we're about passion and joie de vivre as we play the game, the joy of playing, and we must all be with each other and together, and we go to fucking own them. It's like, it's all about like the spirit, the atmosphere that you create, and it's about fun. Like, notice Kenny S was one of the biggest proponents for allowing stage noise and the crowd to interact with him because he wants to get hype off the kills and stuff. He's a bit like a North American in that sense, whereas you think of some of the Danes, etc., they're icy cold and they play up to the camera, but that's not what their game's about. The Finns similarly, right? Now, the crucial aspect to MBK here is he will not be the in-game leader. It was outright stated by him in an interview by Vacam, the French website. I'll link it down below, where he says that. So that is a great piece of news right there. Now we can get back to being a fan of MBK, the player. And I actually think if you look at his career, he's just got too good a track record. Like, unless bad players hold him down, this guy just rises to the top again and again and again. So whether it'll be with these star players, I don't know. I actually would probably say initially no. But I think eventually they'll change a piece or two and he will get in the top 10. He'll potentially get into the top 5 again because they've got a great base to this team. Part of that base, and a player who could be the best player and a candidate for top 10 player in the world if things go right, is Valde, of course, the fantastic Danish player, formerly of North. And this is a guy, and then before that, Heroic. This is a guy where people forget how old this guy is. Go look up his, I'll let you do it yourself. Go look up his age on HLTV.org or Liquipedia. You'll be shocked how old he is. But when you see that and then couple it with now having a few years of experience on his belt in good teams and bad, and being an IGL and Stephen even doing a good enough job at it, and being an individual star and doing a very good job at it, you'll see why this guy, it's like, I've told so many orgs, this guy's like the dream pickup for you guys. He got the complete package, basically. The problem is he was trapped in North Prison for way too long, wasn't he? Now listen, last year, there were times when he was legit a top 10 player in the world. He was a very, very good player on an underwhelming team, quite frankly. And actually, as a result, put people like Kirby fucking to shame, quite frankly. What annoys me about Valde's career is before he got into North, and around that time and since then, I've had so many big NA orgs that, by the way, don't have better players or teams right now that I told, just get this guy now. Trust me, this is an example of a player. I can give you the whole write-up, I can tell you everything about him, but listen, I don't just know this guy's game. I know what he's like as a teammate from talking to people, and I have an idea of what he's like as a person. And this guy is the complete package, and he was willing, in theory, to move to North America at the time. So, I mean, I've already myself done by the numbers leaked before. Cloud9 was one of them. This guy could have been in Cloud9. They went a different route, of course. They went to Shroud and Skadoodle for too long, and then they made the move to make the Poggy roster, which I thought, quite frankly, still lacked a true superstar player, which Valde could have been. But whatever, it's by the by now. I think he's going to be a very good player. He's the player I'm the most optimistic about on this team. I can't really see a way it goes badly. He's just such a talent, and now he's free to that prison of North. I think you're really going to see this guy shine. He's also got pretty good English as well, and he's a guy who I don't see struggling with that whole angle or the cultural case, because actually we'll get to that later. They've got a decent enough balance of players in this team. Third on my list is Aleksib. Now listen, this guy, I'll say what I said in my article a few months back. This guy is a monster up-and-coming IGL talent. Like, I've very rarely ever seen someone in the IGL role break out as basically, not a rookie he's playing last year, but a semi-rookie basically, and be IGL in your team to like amazing clutch wins, composed under pressure, great map pool. I mean, not great map pool in terms of width always, but depth certainly on some of the maps. Playing around players who've never been at the top, quite frankly, except Alu. Like, I don't buy this whole angle that I was sold by some of the Ents guys and other people who were close to them, where basically, oh, Alu was the one making the big calls when it was the key moment in the game. Like, having seen Ents play without Aleksib, having seen them play with Aleksib, it's night and day. Alu's not doing any of that shit. Alu actually at the moment is seeming like a pretty bad in-game leader, I've got to say. And I even think it's hit his individual game. I do think, quite frankly, that the calls and the approach and the tactical aspect and the component, it seems to me like most of it came from Aleksib. I might go counter to people's stories, but I go by what I see in the server and I find what makes sense with that. Now listen, based on other things I heard, there were some minor professional aspects that, yeah, I can understand why there might be a grievance to those people. I do think, though, that they cut off their nose to spite their face in this sense. They should have found a way to work through it. And I do, though, want to see if that means there'll be a mild clash over some things in terms of how the team runs with NBK, because obviously Aleksib is going to be the IGL. That is the role. And NBK is a guy who he doesn't take any guff, quite frankly. He has to sometimes. Some of the French teams, they didn't have the options. This is an international team. You can go all over the place, but you're going to have a pretty good player to replace Aleksib as an IGL, at least based on what I've seen. So I look at the players he's got. When you've got NBK and you've got Valde by your side in your Aleksib, you've now got the base to make a tactical team if you want. The other guys, they're the fraggers, they're the young guys. You just put them in position, remove a lot of what they need to think about, because in comes ISSA. You remember this guy from Hellraisers, obviously. Now, this guy is a clear talent. He clearly has ability, but I will say this right now. He is way too inconsistent in terms of playing well. He either has a fairly like humdrum woeful map, or he just goes off like 28 kills, 30 kills, fucking shooting everyone in the head, every like 4 kills in a row. It's all just headshots. Even when he sprays, straight to the head. Now, what's funny is, because he was in a team with Woxic in Hellraisers, and they were kind of the lone guns, it was mainly on Woxic, and then if ISSA joined in, they could get those big wins. I will say it's actually a decent enough comparison between the two, which is, if you look at how he aims, he looks like he has higher sensitivity, not quite Woxic levels, because that's ridiculous. And he has that similar type of like crisp to the head aim, because if people don't know, when you use higher sensitivity, you're using your wrist just like a surgeon would or an artist would. They don't use the whole fucking arm like we do on the mouse. We do that to protect our arms, and because we use low sensitivity generally in CS, and we're spraying, etc. And we're not moving 360s or 180s all the time like they might in Quake. So there are advantages to that style. It's just that it will wear on your wrist. You have to take a lot of care of it, and anyone who's a drummer, any of that shit knows that you can fuck that up really badly. But there's a reason why actually in the early days some people had bonkers aim in games, because actually they were using that style before we invented the other styles and the big mouse pads and the better mice also, by the way, that could handle you moving really fast across the whole mouse pad instead of just a tiny little movement. So the key for me, so he's going to be relied upon to not only be a fragger in this team, but I would assume the entry as well. And that's going to be a key role in this squad, because we do have some players who historically are a little bit more passive. I mean, NBK can play the entry aspect. I'm not really sure I'm as happy when he does that, quite frankly. I don't really know if it's his skill. He's just got too much brains. I'd rather have him like slightly further back in the round. So I'm interested to see what they'll do in this team in terms of who will go in where. If Aleksib will help with the entry role, if it's just mantuu and ISSA who are going to do it. But I will say, it doesn't matter if ISSA works out or not. Him and Mantuu are obviously replaceable players if it goes badly. If one of them turns out to be good, great, they stay. If both of them turn out to be good, brilliant. Then we go forwards and we have a mouse spots type scenario where you made all the question marks turn into positive answers, which brings up Mantuu. Now, a guy I've pretty much never seen. I was watching a couple of games just now to get an idea of it. I saw in the interview that NBK did with Vakam that I mentioned earlier, he was the secondary AWPer in attacks. Okay, cool, this team needs an AWPer, quite frankly. NBK was bigging him up. I mean, that doesn't mean much. He's joined the team now. Obviously, he's brought him in as a talent. Then again, there was reduced numbers of players out there that were actually available at this point in time, especially because I actually got the sense from some of the things I heard, OG didn't want to spend massively, so I don't know if they wanted to buy out a player that might have to pay like a certain amount for, as opposed to maybe getting someone for cheaper. Now, there are going to be some issues in this team, I think. First of all, is the leadership angle. You might think, wait a minute, you already said NBK is not going to be the leader. Aleksib is going to get his chance. Yeah, but NBK had to, in the interview, put this little sentence into the mix, just sneaking in there under the door. He said, double lead is a possibility, but we're starting this way. We'll see what happens next. The fact he's even hinting at that is a little bit worrying. So I just hope Aleksib does so well, it's not even a consideration. NBK can just be a secondary caller, a guy who contributes ideas, or plays a role in the game that has some sort of communication premium based around it and takes some of the load off some of the other guys. In terms of personalities, I think they have a solid enough balance. You've got guys like Mantuu and ISSA who's still fairly inexperienced. Then you have Aleksib, who, as far as I can tell, personality-wise, pretty chill guy, pretty cool. NBK, definitely a cool customer. Valde is one of the chillest guys ever, but actually does have some aspects of the mindset to be a star player. And obviously, you'd hope someone like ISSA, he's a plus forwards player who's shooting you in the head if he can anyway. So I think a lot of that's mainly on Mantuu, the guy I don't really know. The others actually in their own respective role and balance within balancing out the personalities and giving each type of a player, I think actually fit the bill. Obviously, you're going to need role balance in terms of the roles in the game. I think most of those are generally set. Like, I'm going to guess personally that you have ISSA as your entry player. AWPing's a bit trickier. Obviously, sometimes you'll use Mantuu for that. Aside from that, I would say you're probably going to be more of a rifle team overall. I hope Valde is some sort of like a lurk, just given all the resources he wants type player who can have the say as to when he goes in and what he does because he's just so smart himself. And then NBK fills in whatever's left over and depending on what the map is and plays with a player in a small site, presumably. These will be obvious things to do. In terms of the fragging angle, that's an area I do have some concerns because obviously they're putting a lot of onus on the fragging to come from Valde, ISSA and Mantuu. NBK will have certain tournaments he does well. Aleksib generally is not going to, even though he fragged great at the major. The problem with that is ISSA's very inconsistent in the Hellraisers teams, admittedly, different set of players in IGL, and Mantuu has just never been on this tier 1 level and had a chance to do it. So I'm not going to just go ahead and gamble 2 question marks immediately turn into great examples of fragging and a clap fragging at a world-class level if you want to be a top 10 team. Then again, though, I am very confident in Valde. I think he will be very good, especially now he's not an in-game leader. Then there's the angle that, quite frankly, you can get anyone else, right? This is a multinational core. I mean, if you go ahead and you have NBK, Valde, and Aleksib, you could potentially have a very good core of team play and understanding tactically to the team, and then you can plug and play the other angles or elevate them, even if they're not that sick as fraggers. I think teams like ENCE, Renegades are example teams that don't need a load of really good fraggers, but they have the good tactical basis and a solid chemistry between the players, and hence, as a result, they were able to accomplish ridiculous things for what they were able to do. Like, they didn't have a superstar talent on the level of a Ziwu, Simple, etc., but they were up there in the rankings above some of these people sometimes. So I'm not surprised by this move, and I am surprised, but in different ways. I'm surprised in the sense that it's actually OG they went with, because based on things I've heard, there were big teams coming soon that they probably could have gotten an even crazier deal from, higher salary, better aspects. Then again, though, the reason I am not surprised is because, quite frankly, I wouldn't want to sit on the sidelines this long. Like, you want to play Counter-Strike already. Look at what happened to Sonny when he took all that time off. So if you're Aleksib, if you're obviously an MBK, it's been ages since you were in an official game. So I totally get it that at that point in time, you just want to fucking play again. And you've got a good deal, so okay, take that. One last angle on the org to mention, which is, at this recent TI they won, it was mentioned that they were using the Finnish sports psychology. She's a woman called, I think, Mika or something. She's Finnish, and she was the woman who actually worked with Astralis when they won their first major, E-League Atlanta. Not the last 3, the first one. She also then worked with ENCE, I think, earlier this year. Maybe it was last year. And so, obviously, they developed a pretty good team. And then she worked with, as I say, the OG Dota team for this recent TI. That's a pretty nice record of teams, and I also think it shows a willingness by the org, which is largely a player-centric org to some degrees. I mean, literally some of the players are involved with running the org. It shows a willingness to potentially provide more of the resources around the players And you'd hope people like those OG Dota 2 players would understand, like, it's not just about playing the game. And if you've got a multinational squad, in Dota, it's a lot easier to get away with that. In CS, I hope that means they're going to be provided with the coaches and the analysts and the boot camps that can help them get that chemistry and overcome national differences, cultural differences, just inexperience, quite frankly, from some of the players and having to integrate immediately into a tier 1 team. But I think the signs for this team pretty good. Like, they could compete to be a top 10 team. We've got a pretty competitive top 10 right now. Some of that's dependent on ISSA and mantuu, quite frankly. I think in the future, I would guess they're probably 1 or 2 roster moves away. But at that point in time, if you establish yourself, then you get a big player. Maybe you get another big French player. And at that point in time, you are absolutely cooking with gas. And we can go to the top 5 with... We can talk about winning shit at that point in time, because I like the base of this team. That's the thing. And the idea that you can keep those guys together, and they're all pretty rational guys, means that this team could extend for a long time. This video was kindly supported by Alexander Rao, Blunt Smoking Anus Destroyer, Dane Cuskley, Dean Tanglis, Chi Mao, JDubs, NateDOhDoubleG, Peter the Feeder, Tobias Bernasconi, and a special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion and Mohammed, Alabdul, Razzaq. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Maybe you'd like to ask me a question in my monthly Patreon AMA. Would you like teasers on upcoming content that I'm doing? Maybe you want to take part in a discussion directly with me? Well, if so, then put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description below.